Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Chloe. I post videos about books and I'm sitting in a bit of a different area. I was going to say location, but it's really not. It's the same location. Like, I usually film, like less than a metre away from where I'm sitting. My bookcase is just a mess right now, and while I'm like, it's never been super tidy on my channel, I don't know. Alas, this video is going to be my April wrap up. It's been a while since April ended. I just haven't gotten around to filming this wrap up, the same as I had last month. I don't know. I would say I've been busy with things, but like genuinely, like most of my life takes place in here. But my mind's definitely been busy, so that's one thing. If you've seen my last couple of monthly wrap-ups, you would know that I've started doing sort of statistics, and because of the way that my month went in April when it came to reading, I decided it's not good for my brain to be focusing on statistics. So I'm going to drop that indefinitely. I don't think I want to bring it back, because the thing is, obviously, when I read loads and loads of books, I like to see the statistics to be like, oh yeah, look what you've done. But at the same time, it's not great when I then have a month where I don't read as many in comparison. And I think just in general, numbers aren't always the best way to go. Do you know what I mean? So this month we're not doing statistics, probably not going to do it for a while. In the month of April I managed to read, I think, about 7? Yes, about 7 books, which is comparatively less than what I read in March, and I'm okay with that, but it took a bit of getting used to the fact that I was taking a bit longer to finish books than I had beforehand, and like, I know why that is, and I know like why I wasn't reading as fast. So it's not like a surprise to me, but it was like, you know, obviously when you're used to doing something at a certain pace and then all of a sudden like it changes, you feel different, you feel weird, but you get used to it, or at least I did. I feel like I'm being so somber. I don't know why I'm being like this. I want to be happy. I'm happy. I'm happy. No, seriously, it was a good month when it comes to like ratings and stuff like that. I think I only gave 4 and 5 stars, which is like a very good thing. It is so good. But let's just get into the books, because obviously I don't want to sit here and just ramble about stuff. Basically, at the beginning of this month, I was back home with my parents, so I didn't have all my books, so I decided to read some ebooks, the same as sort of like the end of March going into the beginning of April. And at the beginning of April I actually read quite quickly. I managed to read 2 ebooks within a few days, I think, before coming back to my apartment. The first book that I read in April was Boy Parts by Eliza Clark, and this book was so interesting, like genuinely. If you think that you can deal with body horror, I mean not so much body horror, but just like things that would typically be labelled as like gross, you know, like sick and blood and drug usage and things like that. If you can deal with that, if you don't think it would be triggering or too unpleasant for you, then I 100% recommend you read this book. It is, I would pitch it as like a realistic horror, in the sense that, or like, I guess it's kind of like a thriller horror. I don't actually know, it says contemporary. I mean, on Goodreads it basically just says contemporary horror literary fiction. So it is like a bit of an amalgamation of loads of different genres, and it's, you know, it doesn't have that much tension, but it still has a bit of like a thrilling element, and it just, like, as I said, it feels like horror but like in a more contemporary setting, which is really intriguing. I love that kind of exploration of the horrors of everyday life, of like, you know, real things that people actually go through. And this is definitely the kind of book that you should read if you're looking for something like that. I feel like I can't breathe. Why can't I breathe? It's because I'm sitting cross-legged. That's probably why. Don't know if this helps me. In my little Goodreads review, just to sum it up, I essentially said that after finishing Bunny, which I read in March, I was naturally looking for something that was along the lines of Bunny, something that would be really odd and I guess slightly disturbing and weird and slightly whimsical, and just to have the same kind of what the hell am I reading vibes to it, because I really enjoyed that. Bunny was, I think, my favourite book of March, so I was looking for something similar to that, and I had heard that Boy Parts also had that kind of weird vibe, so it definitely had similar vibes. The way that I would describe it is Bunny feels a lot more fantastical, a lot more sort of fairy tale horror, but Boy Parts feels more gritty and down to earth. And I really liked the grittiness as well. It's one of my favourite things about, so Stephen King is one of my favourite authors if you weren't aware. And one of the things that I think he does really well is when he writes about real life, he's very gritty in his writing. And to the point where some people would call it vulgar. Like, I would describe it as vulgar, but not necessarily unnecessarily vulgar. Did I just say necessarily unnecessarily? Wow. I don't know what I'm saying. Yeah, so that's one of my favourite things about Stephen King's writing. So whenever someone writes with that kind of grittiness, because I am a very privileged person and I haven't experienced a lot of the sort of things that are often described in a very gritty way, I can very much deal with it, and I understand that for some people it's a lot more difficult, so therefore you kind of need to sugarcoat things. Not necessarily, I don't think that sugarcoating things is always a bad thing, but for me I really like grittiness. Like, it's just something that my brain likes. My brain likes the reality, my brain likes grittiness, and it's probably because I come from a very sheltered background and a very privileged standpoint, so it's easy for me to read things like that and not get too swept up in it, if that makes any sense. I also wrote that I felt like Boy Parts was a bit more in the sort of surreal category. If you've read it, the thing is, I can't really explain it to you without spoiling it if you haven't already read it. But if you have read Boy Parts, you will sort of know what I mean, in the sense that there are parts where you just don't know if things are real or if they're not, which Bunny definitely does have as well. Like, there's bits where you just don't know if it's real or not, but the way that Mona Awad does it in Bunny is a lot more fairy tale-esque, because it uses like the sort of, I guess, like a fable kind of way. She uses bunnies and animals as a kind of symbolism, whereas in Boy Parts, what Eliza Clark does is, it doesn't feel like a fairy tale, but it also doesn't feel like it's necessarily real, even though it's set in a very real setting. It's very difficult to explain. If you've read it, you'll understand what I mean, I think, and if you haven't read it, then read it. Something else that I really loved, and I think is a really interesting topic to bring up in any kind of book, but particularly when it comes to thrillers and horrors and anything that has that kind of surreal, fantastical element without it being like fantasy. I mean, even in fantasy it's interesting, but I think horror in particular is a really great genre to work with the topic of economy and social class and status and sort of what that means for someone's life. Once again, comparing it to Bunny, a kind of central theme, I guess, is that sort of economy and that social class. In Bunny, we're following a character who has recently fallen into a more sort of financially unstable situation, and so beforehand she, I believe, from what I can remember, she came from like I don't want to say a well-off family because I can't remember if it was, but like basically she came from a financially stable situation and she sort of fell into a more unstable situation financially because of some things that happened in her family, and that sort of shows the sort of difference between having grown up with money and then all of a sudden finding yourself in a situation and feeling obviously sorry for yourself, but also I think the character sort of acts as if this has been her whole life, whereas in Boy Parts the main character comes from a family that did not start off having loads of money and then fell into a situation where they started getting a lot of money, so there's really that sort of talk of the difference between sort of the old rich and the nouveau rich. So that was really interesting. And just in general economy, like I don't know why I'm obsessed with money, but I think economy is really cool. Not to learn about, like I would never go to university or anything, I would never study economy, but like reading it from a fictional standpoint, like yes, I like it. The second book that I read in April was also an ebook, and that was No Exit by Taylor Adams, which is a thriller, and I was super excited to read this. I think I first heard about it from Gabby Reads. The premise of this book just really intrigued me. It's essentially about this woman who finds herself stranded at like a rest stop gas station kind of situation, and she's stranded because it's like really snowy. You know, you can't get out any cars because if you try and drive, well, you probably just won't get anywhere, and if you do get anywhere, you'll probably end up crashing your car. So it's like best stay put at this place. And she goes in, and there's some different people, there's a handful of different people, and at some point she leaves the actual little building and goes out to her car or something like that, and notices that there's a van with a little girl who is seemingly being kidnapped and is being held, just being held in that van. And she's trying to figure out who is responsible for the kidnapping, but also trying to save this little girl and trying to figure out what's the best way to go about it without putting the girl in even more danger, but also putting herself in danger. And one of the things that I really liked about the story is the main character. I think that she is so smart. I think that she did basically everything that I would like to think I would do in that situation. Obviously you don't know until you are in a situation like that, but like I generally think that she did everything that she sort of needed to do. I just really enjoyed reading about this character. I genuinely can't remember much about it because my brain just forgets everything, but on my Goodreads I said that I enjoyed the character development and that I loved the twists and turns that kept on coming throughout the whole book. So a twisty thriller, if you like that kind of thing, I definitely really enjoyed it. That's basically all I can remember, all I can say. It's one of the better thrillers that I've read for a while, although I haven't read that many thrillers recently, but definitely a very, very good one. I also gave this book 4 stars. I'm going to be annoying, and these next 3 books were in a video, so I'm not going to say much about them because I want you to go and watch that video if you haven't. If you have already watched the video, then you will know what I thought of these books. Obviously I will still give ratings, I'll still give very, very small synopses and how I felt about them. The video which I'm talking about is the video in which I read 3 of Spoopy Hall's favourite books. So if you haven't seen that, go and check it out, I will link it somewhere. And the first book that I read for that video was Heartstopper Volume 1. All I can say is I need to get my hands on volumes 2, 3 and 4. And I'm guessing that more's coming out at some point, but I know that Volume 4 has just been published, so I definitely need to get my hands on them at some point. Heartstopper is, if you can't tell already, a graphic novel. I'm sure you've heard about it. I think that everyone probably has heard of it. It's a very, very well-loved, well-known graphic novel series on BookTube and on Bookstagram, and I'm guessing just in general, I think people like this. I think people love this with their whole hearts, and I can see why. I really enjoyed it. It was really cute. I gave it 4 stars, and the reasoning behind me not giving it 5 stars is because for me, there's almost a roof, if that makes any sense. There's sort of a limit of stars that I can give a graphic novel purely because I don't feel like I get this whole story out of a graphic novel. And I know that for some people that's not the case. For me, I'm just a massive fan on having details and explanations and things like that. So I don't feel like I get that out of graphic novels. God. I don't feel like I get that out of graphic novels. But I gave this 4 stars, which basically means that if this had been a novel, I would have given it 5 stars, if that makes any sense. So one of the best graphic novels. I think probably the best graphic novel that I have read so far. And I understand why everyone loves it. And I'm definitely going to check out more stuff by Alice Oseman. I'm particularly interested in reading some of her actual novels. The second book that I read for that video was The Humans by Matt Haig. This is my first This is my first This is my first Matt Haig book that I've ever read, and I'm definitely going to be picking up more stuff by him. As I said, this was a great reading month. This was yet again another 4 stars, I believe. No, I gave this 5 stars. I gave this 5 stars. I absolutely love this. I think that the idea behind it, the sort of message, I guess, was so gorgeous and so wonderful. Essentially, The Humans is about an alien who takes the space of a Cambridge professor, who is a professor in mathematics, and he is working on a theorem. The professor is working on a theorem to try and like solve this problem, and if they solve this problem, then basically humans will have a lot more knowledge than we have to begin with, and it means that we can be a lot more advanced when it comes to technology and living and loads of different stuff. In this book, the aliens are a lot more advanced than us. They basically just live in a world where it's all based off of science and maths and knowledge and things like that. So not much love, not much, you know, what we sort of, I guess, attribute to being human. There's none of that, which would make sense because they're aliens. This alien comes down to Earth, takes the place of this professor, and is trying to prevent the professor from figuring out this theorem, or he has actually figured out the theorem. He's trying to destroy the evidence. The reason that this alien is trying to get rid of all this evidence is basically because the aliens believe that if humans have this knowledge, that their brains will not be able to adapt properly, if that makes any sense. They think that if humans were to have that level of knowledge, that their brains wouldn't be intelligent or smart or advanced enough to actually understand and interpret that knowledge. Yeah, as I said, I really enjoyed the sort of sentiment behind this, because the alien starts off not understanding humans and understanding why we are the way we are and why we live and do a lot of things both fueled by hate but also fueled by a lot of love. And the alien starts off being like, oh, well, you do this and you do that, and there's so much hate in the world, and you know, you're destroying your world. And then towards the end begins to realise that actually there's a lot more to human life than just destroying the world and hating people. Which, as I said, I really enjoyed this. I gave this 5 stars. The next book, the final book that I read in that video, and my favourite book of April, and I think my favourite book of this year so far, is Battle Royale by Koshin Takami. I have to look at the cover every single time to make sure I'm not saying his name wrong. Battle Royale is a dystopia. It's set in Asia, and it's essentially this world where every like half year, like twice a year, a class of 15-year-old kids is put into an arena and told that they have to fight to the death and that only one person can survive. And essentially this is just following one of the I can't remember what it's called, but basically one of the sort of rounds, I guess, of Battle Royale. And it's just following this group of kids, this class group, I don't know what I'm saying. This group of kids basically have been put in this arena, and then they're told that they have to fight to the death, and oh my god, it's just following loads of different groups. So they basically, like, naturally they form alliances. Some of them decide to go more like lone wolf, and it's just following the different kids, shifting perspective, finding out sort of how they cope with the situation. And like the premise in itself is so interesting, and the way that it was written was just absolutely superb. And I've said this before, I think I said it in the video, I'm definitely going to be looking into more translated dystopia, because I think especially Asian translated literature is absolutely superb, and what I've read of translated fiction from Asia is absolutely amazing, and I definitely need to pick up more of it. And yeah, really enjoyed this. I gave this 5 stars. As I said, it was probably my favourite book of the year so far, and I'm so happy I decided to pick this up, this was kind of the video this was kind of the book that inspired the video that I made. The next book that I read in the month of April was City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab, which is the first book in the Cassidy Blake trilogy. And I didn't make a video specifically dedicated to this book. Kind of wish I did because I really enjoyed it. But I did talk about it at the very beginning of my reading vlog that I made for the last book I read in April, which obviously I'll talk about in a minute. So, City of Ghosts follows Cassidy Blake, who is a teenager, a young person, 12-year-old. I think she's 12. I don't know why I'm looking as if I'll be able to find out. But also, look at this map. It's sick. It's pretty epic. Anyway, and I've actually been to some of these places, so I feel pretty, you know, cool. City of Ghosts, as I was saying, is about Cassidy Blake. She has the ability to talk to ghosts. This is because when she was younger, I think about a year prior to the setting of this book, she basically died and then was brought back to life by a ghost, who then ended up being her best friend. And his name is Jacob, and she's the only person that can see him. And he's very nice, and I've said this before. We love Jacob. Everyone loves Jacob. Like, how can you not love Jacob? Anyway, in this book, we follow Cassidy as she goes to Edinburgh with her parents, who are like paranormal writers, and they have been offered to do a TV show in which they go to some different cities that are known to be very haunted, which obviously Edinburgh is. We love Edinburgh for the hauntedness. It's all good. It's very fun. And so, yeah, as I said, the setting is Edinburgh, which just is the thing that sort of primarily intrigued me. Also the fact that it's like a paranormal middle grade really intrigued me as well. I don't read a lot of middle grade, but if it's kind of like this theme, I was like, yes, I'm down for it. I'm so down for it. As I said, it's a trilogy. The next book is set in Paris, and the third and final book is set in New Orleans, which I'm particularly interested in because Edinburgh and New Orleans are two of my favourite cities ever. Even though I've only ever been to Edinburgh, I haven't been to New Orleans. But like, I love both of them. And I think that they're so cool for their paranormal, witchy vibes and all that jazz. And quite literally, if you know what I mean, comment an axe down below. I don't actually know if there's an axe emoji. That would be absolutely hilarious. But I was talking about City of Ghosts. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the setting. I knew that I would enjoy this because it's set in Edinburgh. The only thing is I do kind of wish there was more diving into the setting and sort of like some of the stories. Like, there were definitely stories that I have heard of that were mentioned, but I'm particularly interested in the ghost stories, ghost lore, if that's what you call it, in Edinburgh. Like, I find it so fascinating. So it would have been cool to sort of go more into that in this book. But otherwise I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. And I can't wait. Like, I'm so excited to continue the series, particularly to get to the last book. And last but definitely not least, I read My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is a very sad book. It's a very somber book. We're just gonna skip past that because I got all my sadness and my anger and everything out in my reading vlog, which you should definitely go and check out. I will leave it linked once again. And My Dark Vanessa essentially just follows Vanessa, who at the age of 15 gets into a relationship, or what she deems to be a relationship, with her English teacher, Mr. Strain. And as I said, it's a very sad book. It's a book that made me angry. It's a book that made me just absolutely appalled and made me feel physically sick. But it's such a good book. It's so well written. If you're someone that does not feel that they will be triggered by this book, then you should definitely read it. One of my friends, Emily, who I will link down below, she's also got a channel, the Three Bears Book Cottage. She commented on my video basically saying that maybe the reason that because I was kind of not shocked but surprised a little bit at how affected I was by this book, because I'm someone that's very privileged and I did not think I'd be triggered by it. I wasn't triggered, but I was definitely sort of moved and like affected by it. And she basically just commented saying that maybe it's the writing, maybe the fact that like the writing is the way it is, and this author clearly, you know, knows how to write and make people feel something. And like, I think she was 100% right in saying that. So this writing is honestly like so good, and it's a debut novel, and I was absolutely shocked when I heard about that, because there are authors that have careers that span decades and decades and they don't even reach anything near the level of writing in this. So it's so good, but it's so bad because of the topic, but like so worth reading, especially if you're someone that's very privileged and has not dealt with this kind of situation before, or, you know, just wants to be put into someone else's shoes, wants to have a different perspective. It's not an easy read, but it's worth it. And I'm going to leave it on that. We're going to finish with that. We're done. That's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed, despite the fact that this is, I don't know what the date is, but it's a very long time since the end of April, but I hope you enjoyed hearing about the books that I read in April anyway, and I will see you in my next video.